Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, whatever time it is for you. If this is your first virtual conference presentation, I'll say welcome. If you've been participating in the sessions, I'll say I hope all is going well. And if this is your last presentation, I want to thank you for participating. The RTP Director's Address used to be the last presentation in the conference. But because it is a virtual conference, we tape this so you can watch it at your convenience. It's odd for me, as I like to connect with my audience. It's really hard to joke or tell a humorous story virtually. I want to thank the planning committee who have done a terrific job, and I want to also thank my staff who have also likewise done a terrific job. What I'd like to talk about today or tonight or this morning are a number of things. Administrivia, highlights of the year, the 2015 competitions, results-driven accountability, the budget, the RTP vision, and some notable accomplishments. I do promise to talk fast. So let's talk a little bit about Administrivia, and this is the part of the program where I put my bad cop hat on. So let's talk about some things that have been issues. The first is application formatting requirements, and I'm talking about fonts and spacing, graphs and charts and other figures. This year we declared a number of applications ineligible for formatting violations. We really want you to get the benefit of the review of your applications, and in order for that to occur, they need to be formatted consistent with the directions. And the directions are simple. You double space everything, including figures, graphs, charts, and you have a 12-point font. Okay, not a 10-point font, 8-point font, 14-point font, but a 12-point font. Stick to those very basic guidelines, double check it, triple check it, and I'm sure there'll be no problem. The second is the submission time. 4:30 and 0 seconds is not 4:30 and 20 seconds. If it comes at 4:30 and 20 seconds, our system will not even accept it. So please check things like your registration in the SAM system. Check to make sure that this can go through prior to the day that it's due. Some grants administration issues, large available balances. You know, if you don't expend your funds, it's unlikely you are producing the outcomes you were funded to produce. So large available balances are a red flag for us that we'll contact you about and discuss with you whether or not you in fact are pursuing the outcomes you committed to pursue. The last is the issue of service obligation in our personnel preparation grants. It's very simple. You must use the OMB approved form for the actual agreement, and you must use the exiting form. And we have a debt management payment group that pursues students, scholars who have not met their obligations, and they're frankly fairly aggressive. Now, if the scholar is tracked down and it turns out that they were given a exit agreement or an actual service obligation agreement inconsistent with the OMB form, it's more than likely it will be the university that will be responsible for paying the student's debt. So this is something to please take into consideration. Lastly, in this area, I'd like to stress that you consider serving on our standing panel and doing grant reviews. There's no better way to learn how to write an effective grant and one that can get funded than to review them. It's a great experience and it's a service to the field. So let's talk a little bit about the year in review. And this will be 2014. I just wanted to give you some highlights. First, we're pretty proud that we were able to publish our notices of inviting applications much earlier than in the past. We had, in collaboration with the Office of Safe and Healthy Students, we made school climate grants. That was a $43 million program. And the great thing for us, besides the fact we think it's the right thing, is that $2 million went to our PBIS center to provide technical assistance to those new school climate grantees. We are, in addition, supporting the administration of these grants with OSEP staff. Another highlight, the SPDG, the State Personnel Development Grant, returned this year, so we're quite pleased with that. We funded a TA center on increasing graduation rates, which was a combination of the previous transition center and dropout center. We funded the National Center for Systemic Improvement. This is the largest TA investment we've ever made, over $40 million over 5 years. And this was the consolidation of all of the regional resource centers. And the major scope of work is to focus on the state systemic improvement plan to support states in the development and implementation of that. We also funded the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, which was a combination of our NIMUS Center and our Accessible Instructional Materials TA centers. As always, we funded PTIs and CPRCs. We did something different this year. We funded a military PTI TA center. And the purpose of that center is to support all of the other PTIs, the over 100 PTIs, with issues related to children whose parents are in the military. We funded a fiscal data center to support states in dealing with the myriad of fiscal reporting requirements. And we funded a data management center which focuses on data architecture. Lastly, we funded the Promise TA Center. And the Promise TA Center supports the $200 million Promise grants. So that's what we did in 2014. This year, we published early again. We published our Stepping Up priority and have competed it, although we have not announced the awards. We published TV Access. We published our doctoral training and our master's and bachelor's training programs, the 325D and the 325K. As a matter of fact, quite a few of the scholars who are watching this virtual conference are probably funded with those grants. We have published an adolescent literacy model demonstration project, which will fund 3 models, which we're extremely excited about. We published our Parent Training and Information Center and our Community Parent Resource Center priorities. We just published a Research and Development Center on emerging technology. And this is building on a previous investment. It will focus on better, more efficient ways of doing video description, but we're also looking to see how accessible instructional materials could be applied to non-print disabled, non-visually impaired, and non-blind students. We're looking at a potential grantee to explore how to better serve kids with more multisensory needs, kids who have processing issues, kids who have disabilities but maybe need something else. Embedded in that grant is to take a look at 3D printing and how 3D printing technology might better serve kids with disabilities. So another area that I wanted to touch base on is the results-driven accountability. Now, RDA. Now, really, RDA changed the conversation from compliance to focus on child and student performance. Out in the States, this is the biggest thing going in special education. Our technical assistance efforts will play a part in supporting the state systemic improvement plan, and from the state systemic improvement plan, there will be a state identified measurable result, and our TA will support that. When we talk about a state identified measurable result, we're looking at things like increasing third grade reading or increasing third grade math scores or increasing early childhood outcomes, increasing graduation rates. These types of child performance is what the results-driven accountability is focused on. The next area I wanted to discuss is our budget. Now, we are Part D of IDEA, and what I can tell you, in person, when I've done this in front of 800 people, it's usually a large PowerPoint, and we discuss every budget line, but I'll simply say this: we were level funded. So there was no increase, but there was also no decrease, and so we're certainly glad there was no decrease. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the research to practice vision. I mean, how do we see ourselves? How do we fit into the field of special education and early intervention? Here's what we've been developing, and while this isn't completely finalized, it'll give you a sense of how we see ourselves. We see that RTP will positively influence the field of early intervention and special education policy and practice, and respond to the needs of the field, to assist SEAs, LEAs, and our grantees to improve and deliver evidence-based practices and services. We see our core function that we'll realize this vision and mission by, one, serving as a national leader in early intervention and special education programs, policies, and activities. Two, collaborating with federal partners and key stakeholders in education and related fields. And three, developing and administering grants and contracts. That's kind of how we see our mission and what we do. We see ourselves both influencing and leading the field. Now I'd like to chat a little bit about some of the notable accomplishments. And, you know, Part D has a very long history of making investments that have historically pushed the boundary of what is possible for children with disabilities. So what have we done in the last year that I think has been pushing the field in the right direction? So the first is intensive intervention. So we redefined low incidence disabilities by including intensive intervention. What we've tried to do is look at the needs of kids as opposed to the label of kids when we talk about low incidence. That these are children at the top of the pyramid, whether it be behavior or academics. Kids who have been minimally responsive to the best interventions. And that doesn't matter whether they have a sensory disability or a learning disability or are autistic or intellectually disabled. It means that they have intensive needs. So we defined it as persistent and severe learning or behavioral problems that need the most intensive individualized support. So we now allow that to be funded under low incidence, and we have funded any number of preparation programs that are focusing on children with intensive needs. We also funded this year, and we're very excited about it, a consortium of 7 doctoral training institutions to focus on preparing doctoral scholars in the area of intensive intervention. And what we see happening with that is a cascade effect. that we will train doctoral scholars, that those scholars will eventually become faculty, that as faculty they'll do research in the area of intensive intervention and at the same time prepare future teachers. And we see this as a multiplier effect. We're very excited about it, and we certainly look forward to seeing the outcomes of that. The other thing we did under the area of intensive intervention was we held an intensive intervention summit. And the theme of the summit was how to address minimal responders. And we brought in the top researchers and practitioners in the field. And the outcome of that summit will be forthcoming. We frankly haven't developed the final report on that. Another area that we think we've accomplished a great deal is in Bookshare. Bookshare, of course, produces digital books, free digital books for students who are blind, visually impaired, or print disabled, and they're free. So Bookshare crossed the threshold of having over 400,000 eligible children registered for this service, over 400,000. I also would like to say something about our two 1% assessment consortia, DLM and NICSIT. These consortia were funded at over $60 million total to develop the 1% test for children with the most significant cognitive disabilities. We feel that these tests have very much operationalized high expectations for those students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. I think one of the most unique aspects of this test that has simply never been done before is that professional development has been built into the tests themselves and into the administration to enhance the teacher's skill set to provide evidence-based instruction for these students. So that it's not just about measuring a child, it's also about how to best teach that child. We've also continued to work with the Department of Labor on Promise grants. This year, we broke our record for our annual reports to Congress. We published 4 of them. We have been behind in our publication. I guess I'm not proud of this, but I'd say for the last 25 years, we have been behind, and we've actually caught up, and we have caught up to where we're supposed to be on the annual report to Congress. We continue to have an immense impact on general education. Multi-tiered systems of support, PBIS and school climate initiatives, and I'll mention that PBIS is currently in over 20,000 schools. So when I talk about impact, this is impact not just on special education, but on general education. We don't do behavior programs or school climate programs for just kids with disabilities. It focuses on the entire school, the entire LEA, and the entire state. So, in conclusion, I have to say that I have the greatest job in the world. I get to work with incredibly talented people and facilitate the process of putting funds in the hands of really smart people, y'all, to do great things for kids and families. What could be more fun? I thank you, and I hope you enjoy.